pay us with their time, right? So we're gonna pay them back. We're gonna pay Pep back by standing up at the count of 3 and giving him the best rock star applause you can ever get, right? So 1, 2, 3, on your feet, everybody. Give it up for Pep Gomez. Welcome. I mean, you know, my first question is always, have you been welcome as a rock star anytime? You're probably going to say yes in 2016 when you were interviewed here, right?
Yeah, when I was here in 2016, I had that pleasure. I didn't actually remember it, but now I do. So
I think that
thank you very much.
It was very funny. I still remember one part in the event. To give some context, so Pep, he created Fever when he was like 18 or something really crazy. Then he moved on to be an investor. He's a music producer, he's a DJ, he's a mentor of many startups. He went on to Numa, which was an accelerator for startups. Then he created Reby, which is the company in 2017 that has just sold for 100 million. And so he's polyphacetic. He's a person that's very, I would just say, polyvalent. And the thing is, I remember that one part about that conversation, we were discussing negotiation tactics. Mm-hmm. And you're like, my tactic in negotiation, whenever I'm talking to VCs or the board or whatever, it's like, I get really fucking angry. I punch the table, I stand up, and you start like running around like saying, fuck this shit, fuck that shit.
Yeah.
That was super.
Yeah, maybe now I'm more moderated, maybe.
What happened in this?
I'm still, no, I think I just grew. Right? I just grew up, right? So I'm older now, so.
You're still in Forbes 30 under 30?
Yes.
Okay.
29 now. So.
You're eligible for that. Anyway,
yeah.
Let's start from the very beginning. So, of course, if you want to learn more about Fever and Numa and the previous companies, go back to the video from 2016. We're going to be talking about Reby and the sale that he did in a few weeks ago only. How did the idea come about, and how did you get it started, and why did you go into e-scooters actually?
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure for me to be here. So with Reby, I would say it's the response to my interest into regulatory technology and how essentially regulation plays a role, and legal public law plays a role, and how can private companies interact with public companies or public administration in a way where both of them benefit from that relationship. Then one thing I did was, as you mentioned Numa. I was also an advisor for Mobile World Capital, was involved in Numa and so on. One of the things I did after I left Fever's day-to-day was to dedicate time to understand public regulation. Mobile World Capital is a foundation that organizes Mobile World Congress. And then that foundation is half private, so half from private sponsors and so on, and then it's also half public, so from the government. And there were many things related to that where I learned how public contracting works, how tenders work, and all of that. And then suddenly after I would say 1 year being involved in these things, I started to think about how can I use this know-how that I'm learning to build my next company. And then what I did is I started to study different industries that I thought were going to be transformed in the following 5 years. Remember, this was 2018, and then first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the obvious things about energy or roads or traditional infrastructure, right? But then most of them, as an example, water is an industry where it takes lots of money to build a company. It's very high turnover but very low margin, and to start a company and actually make a profit out of it can take you 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and I was not interested in doing that. So I very quickly focused on where do I think I can generate an impact within the next 5 years, right? And then, within that, what you would see is that there's a certain allocation, a certain bucket for what I call the future, the next form of infrastructures, where there's some specific industries that I thought were going to explode and needed the public regulatory involvement. One of them was mobility, specifically green mobility, electric mobility, but just in general, how we were moving around the cities. And I thought that the current solutions out there, and I'm going to be specific, like the Ubers, the Cabifys, all of that, in my opinion, they were not solving the problem because they were just doing the same as the taxis, maybe with less regulation or cheaper regulation, but the same was a substitute. Yes, it's like, no, we're doing cars for sharing, but in reality, it's the same thing. And I thought, okay, is there any solution where we can build this, but in a way that makes sense? And then, the difference between what we do, and sorry, I'm extending this question, but it's just to understand. So the difference between something like that, which at the end is just like, no public space occupation, or kind of pseudo or semi-regulated because it's regulated by a lobby market. In the case of micromobility, I thought there's a fundamental change, which is there's a public space occupation. So there's some thing there, which is, you're occupying public space that belongs to someone, and it's the citizens of that city. And therefore, I thought if this is the case, then this is very interesting because it means that this is not going to be open market competition like food delivery and everybody's going to die and the founders are not going to make money and it's going to be a disaster. So essentially I said, this is interesting because if we are able to build good technology and we're able to be differentiating enough technology, I believe this market is going to get very regulated and there's going to be a competitive process to win in the cities. So my approach was always, half of my job was essentially recruiting the best, the most, the smartest lawyers and professors of universities specialized in public regulation. Some of them coming from other industries like energy that they could use as a proxies to adapt to mobility regulation because there was no regulation of mobility. And the other half of my time, I was spending time thinking, okay, all these companies doing it was the beginning, but there were already some companies doing scooters, motors, all of that. And then I was saying all of these people are buying assets in China and they buy B2C adapted, things. And then they just modify a quick hack, modifying something, and they put them on the street. And the problem with these vehicles is that, because they were made, I'm not saying because they were made in China, but because they were made for B2C, for consumers, they were not meant to be safe when you use intensively these vehicles. So I thought, okay, there's a path here to build technology. So half was legal work, half was technology work. And it was designing those vehicles in a way that they were cheaper, they were safer, and in a way where we were having enough things or differentiating enough features as for those vehicles to be ahead technology-wise to win contracts with municipalities. So that was essentially my goal.
There are several things you mentioned here which I think they are particularly interesting. One of them is you took the different approach. Normally entrepreneurs, what they would do is, fuck public administration,
Yeah.
I'm going to go my own way. That's what happened with all of the other. I'm not even going to mention the competitors.
Yeah.
But like they try to go the Uber way, right? Crash and burn. And we go to a city and then we fight there and then we help create the regulation. We push for the regulation to happen. You took the different approach. Was it because you had been a successful founder before and it was not your first company and you knew the ins and outs of regulation?
Well, I think it's, I think it's a very, again, right? So when you look back, it's this thing with the dots with Steve Jobs. If you look back, it's very obvious.
Yeah,
back in the day, I would say that, it's an interesting situation because in my mind, because I was a founder before, I thought, doesn't necessarily, is it not necessarily like this, but in many cases, founders are very, they want to be famous, they want to be on the press, they want to be cool, they want to be perceived as the boss, they have this kind of, and then, they forget about the business. And for them, or success for many years has been raising money.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if I make a company where I'm going to raise a ton of money, I'm going to get diluted and, I'm going to make less money. And I think, when you're a second-time entrepreneur, you think a lot about that. There's of course, the argument, as a founder that has done it maybe 2-3 times, that they say, No, because if the opportunity is big enough, it's worth it. Because even if the company is 10 billion, you will make 2 billion. I think it depends. I think it's all very. I think it's it depends, but in many cases I think there's a misperception of success associated to raising money instead of performing. And in my case, the reason why I did it this way is because I analyzed the problem. I thought, why do I think this market is not working or these companies are not working, and how can I build something where I solve those issues? And by the way, not necessarily. I mean, that would mean probably not being as easy to raise capital because it was different, and probably not as not as fast, and maybe probably less. For a person for a business angel that puts money first, probably it's more like a conservative investment because maybe they will multiply by 10 and not by 100 in 3 years. But on the other side, there's a lot of coverage, right? Because in a downside scenario like the current one, we're very happy, and we're very, we can raise money from banks. There's some people here who can, coming from some banks we work with, and they finance our working capital. So, of course, we need money to grow and we need investors, but it's not this situation where you kind of think, I'm gonna die if I'm not able to raise money and there's 1 month left of cash and what's gonna happen and blah blah blah, right? So.
The other thing that I find pretty remarkable is from the very beginning you had pretty clear that you were going to work shoulder to shoulder with public administration, and also that your vehicles were going to be durable, right? Because you said like most of these vehicles out there, they've got a lifespan of 7 months or something like that. On average, I might be just fucking up, but like give or take 7 months. And then you said ours last 3 times, 4 times, 5 times more. How many iterations did it take for you to find the right model for Reby since the very beginning? How many people?
Iterations in terms of vehicles?
In terms of model and in terms of product as well, both.
So model for me was very clear. For me, it was I'm not gonna go into open markets. We're not gonna go into open markets. We're not gonna fight with 10 companies. So we're just gonna go wherever we think we can be protected. And the protection back in the day was
secondary markets,
secondary markets, or listen, Barcelona, for example. Barcelona, if they have people. I mean, probably I don't give a shit anymore, but I people may think nothing of this, but I do think about it, and I'm still working on that. But essentially, Barcelona has a regulation. People don't know this because if you see the press, Barcelona has a regulation for scooters. It's just that it's very specific. You have to read many, this fucking paper from 1960 that there's some, I don't know. So you have to read about it. You have to understand the rules. There's many rules about how powerful can this scooter be. So the conclusion for many of the companies is, the scooters are forbidden in Barcelona. This is the simplistic way of looking at it.
Exactly.
They are not. It's just that you have to make specific processes to do it. Anyway, bottom line is, we were thinking about cities where there's no competition. That's one thing. And then in terms of the vehicle lifespan, it was more like, I found these 2 co-founders with me that they are living in China. They've been living in China for 13 years. And they are Spanish originally, but they made this bike company. They were the manufacturers for a bike company they sold to Meituan Deiping, the company. It's called Mobike. It's a very successful company in China. And then they explained me that the business model in bikes many years ago, which I could use as an analogy, the ones that won were the bikes that were lasting very long. And I said, can you do the same thing for scooters? Can you do the same thing for motorbikes? And essentially, what I used is the same kind of thing they did for bikes in China, really, to apply it to scooters or mopeds.
Well, actually, one point that I wanted to circle back is to think about public administration, because if your city has got a very strict public regulation for a certain specific sector, it's because everybody's knocking on that door. It's not because they don't want your company. It's because they don't want the 200,000 companies knocking on the door. That's why when you go perhaps to Zaragoza, and they're more open about these kind of regulations because not a lot of companies are interested in that, sector, right?
Yes.
Point made. I just wanted to clear that up because from entrepreneurs, usually on this stage, you will hear like, "Oh, fuck public administration," whatever. It's like, dude, like there are certain things they're doing right as well.
I think that's true. And for us, we have very good relationship with both tier 1 and tier 2 markets. We understand also why sometimes they want to wait, and it's more political reasons, generally speaking. there's two ways, or political reasons or just technical ability. They don't know how to draft regulation about this, so they just delay and delay and delay.
You're not a person that is so much fun fundraising as he's on sales, right? You're kind of like more sales driven, product driven. What was your strategy to start selling this in a sector that was completely new to you?
You mean selling
So
like
I'm looking for the contracts. I mean, I understand that probably the first contracts
Yeah.
didn't come from tenders, but there's a
Yeah.
large part of that.
yeah. How did we do that?
Yeah.
How did, yeah, I mean, we it was, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was not impossible because there were many players coming into cities and just throwing the scooters
Yeah.
and then creating a mess. And then we would be the ones going there and saying, oh, you have an issue, but no worries. We would love if you could regulate it. So for us, it was very easy to go to a city and say, why don't you regulate it?
Okay.
Some cities that may tell you, I don't do it. And there's some cities that will tell you, yes, I want to do it. How can I regulate? And we say, okay, perfect, that's great. So
Perfect.
yeah, so that's pretty much the way we did it. So.
And how about like your sales depended also, your annual revenue depended on tenders, right? So public administration, you go to a tender, there's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
Tenders usually take a long time to complete.
Yes.
They might get delayed. They require a lot of paperwork.
Yes.
It's unsure. Sometimes you are required to spend some money that you don't know whether you're going to get it.
Yes.
Right? So you have to have a lot of cash up front to prepare for that because it's a long sales cycle. The cash is usually paid months, if not years afterwards. How could you withstand this cash pressure?
So usually that's actually a great question because usually what we would do at the beginning is we would first let's assume there's a city that has a tender. We would then apply to the tender, and once we apply to the tender, we would essentially wait until we win. And then usually when you win, you have a time where you can pay for the vehicles, whatever, and deploy them, right? So usually what we would do is we would win the contract, then we will go to a bank, like Javier, who's here from CaixaBank, and then we would go to talk to him and say, hey, we have this contract with this city, we need money. And of course, they wouldn't give you 100% of it because you're a small company, and then you would need to put some money from investors and so on. But usually, if you have a proper tender, that's not going anywhere. And usually it's 3-4 year contracts. So there's some sort of, this is the kind of company that could get financing and gets financing from retail banks because there's a kind of security behind it, plus the assets. That's another story. It's more like asset-backed lending, but I also have the contract with the municipality. So it kind of creates a situation where they understand that there's not going to be a huge SoftBank-based company coming here and destroy the market. So
the other thing about public administration and tenders is that sometimes they're very strict on the entry level, right? On the conditions to participate, right? As a new company, if you don't have any traction, maybe they require, certain level of revenue, certain level of number of employees, numbers in the market, successful case stories. Like, how did you?
We've seen this in a number of cities. The main reason why they would do this usually is to give priority to a specific company they want to give the contract to.
Yeah,
it's a very elegant
you
way.
shouldn't say that in public.
Yeah. So usually when you see this kind of trickies, is because there's someone who's helping them to write these trickies. Because these kind of companies are not, this is very new business. It's a very new mobility business and so on. So usually, there's no one with experience and there's no one with track record, at least not yet. So when we've seen this, it was typically something that we would litigate and we would then go after it because we would think, hey, this doesn't really make sense. And there's only one company out of 30 that can meet these requirements. So we would usually be very strict. I wouldn't say, because this is a very interesting thing, right? Because they would say, oh, you're still very aggressive, Pep, because you like to litigate. It's not that. It's just I think that sometimes people make mistakes and sometimes public administration make mistakes. And sometimes, they just, in Spanish we say se la cuela, no? Sometimes goes one guy who's like whatever from another company say, oh, put this thing, and then this contract is maybe something that only one company out of 30 can meet. So
exactly.
When we would do that, we would just go and say, hey, this is illegal. You should create a competition process. So.
Oh wow! So do you actually have like a legal team in the company?
We have around 15 to 20 people in house doing this. Yeah.
But it looks like, so you mentioned professors, people from academia. experts on the subject, lawyers. That's a lot of people that are hard to just define the super early stages of the company.
Yes.
As like operations wise, but also salary wise. It's hard to pay off all of these salaries if you cannot, if you, So did you raise funds? Like, what was the strategy at the beginning?
So we raised like in total 18 million or so.
Yeah.
3 million at the beginning,
Yeah.
plus some debt. Then we raised another 8 million. So I would say yes, these people you have to pay the salaries and so on. But remember, this business is some business that generates cash, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like a business where maybe one day I will make money. It's a business that makes revenue. So and then plus talking about specifically the legal people, what we're doing is we're really writing the future laws in mobility, right? So from our point of view, if you talk to lawyers, and the more academia they are, the more academical they are, the more smart they are. Usually, they are very curious people who are very interested in, drafting new regulation and drafting new things. So, if you tell them, hey, you can be in this boring, and this is again good and bad, but I'm saying this boring law firm, whatever, or you can come with us with a startup and we're going to write the future of mobility. It's not. It's a very sexy job actually.
Yeah.
Or that's my impression, of course.
Well, in the economic downturn that is kind of like we're facing right now, what are the pieces of advice you would give to these people to reach profitability? Because one of the things about Reby is it was probably the only company in the world in this sector that was actually profitable. I've talked to a lot of them.
Yes.
Some of them have been my clients, and I can tell you they're all losing money. And so when I found out that you were actually profitable, I was like, how did you do it? Like, what can you share with them about that?
Well, I would say there are three things, right? So first of all, is we only operate in cities where we have some sort of monopoly or duopoly, or essentially, we operate this business as an infrastructure business. And for a business like this to be profitable, there's a beneficial point where the city has a big incentive into giving these contracts to one or two companies so they can control where the vehicles are and they know who to call. If there's 10 companies, it's a mess for the city. And then from our company point of view, we are very incentivized in only operating in cities where we can be profitable. And that means one or two players, right? Because you need network effects and so on. It's a public service. Mm-hmm. So, from that point of view, I think that, it's, one thing different than the other ones. Another thing would be that we manufacture our own vehicles, and the others were paying probably twice as much as we were paying.
Which is paradoxical because it's not as cheap, but maybe on the long term it pays off because they're more durable.
Well, actually, it's interesting because we were making vehicles made of aluminum, no plastic, no fancy stuff, and they were probably way cheaper than like 40% cheaper than what they were paying in the market for consumer vehicles.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was actually more ugly vehicles, not as fancy, way cheaper, long lasting. Mm-hmm. And the third thing is we were using a lot of debt, and debt cost anywhere between 0 and 5%. While if you have to raise equity money to buy vehicles, it's unlimited. I mean, you need to raise so much money and so much, inflate the valuations so much in order to raise as much money as you need to pay for all that capex that, as you said, is very capital intensive and so on. So at the end of the game, if you cannot build a debt. This is the same. I was always comparing this because when I started the company, I went to see someone who made this company called Gold Car, which is a rent-a-car business. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to them, and then this is the same as that business because at the end you're renting, and nobody would think a rent-a-car finances the cars with the money from investors in the equity rounds, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it was the same. Like I had to prove that a bank was willing to give us money to buy vehicles to put them on the street at a cost where my unit economics would still work, and I could repay the debt and also make some money. If I would have to pay much more interest rate, you can call it interest rate, you can call it equity financing. That would mean, it's a bubble because it's not backed up with anything. So the valuation is really not backed up with any normal metric that you can think on the top of your mind. Which is, by the way, what happened, in my opinion, with many scooter companies, with food delivery companies, and all these guys, we essentially said, I need the money, so there's only one way to do it. Raise more, raise at a higher valuation. At some point, you see companies that have 1 billion valuation and they make 100 million, they lose 300 million a year. And you say, how is this possible? Well, because you need more money, so you raise more money because people want to put money, and you create inflated valuations just because you need more money.
How many times were you super close to closing the company or running out of money?
Couple of times, 3 times. There was a time that I was actually lending money to the company, and for many times. I was saying like, no, because I know we're gonna get paid, but it's gonna take us 2 months, so I have to lend the money.
So you were the bank of your company.
Yeah, as well. Yeah. And then, and 2-3 times we were about to shut down.
Wow.
Fortunately, nobody ever left. Even there was this time that we were 10 days delayed in the paycheck because we didn't have the money. Everything happened to us, as you can imagine, like as an entrepreneur, and everything happened, and we continue to. And we continue to be there, and we take the company really as a company, not as a fundraising tool or as a fundraising game where from time to time we need to raise in order to survive.
The other thing, probably the last thing about tenders, and sorry, I'm just like drilling down on this because I think it's the first time we talk about public administration in this freaking event, is that even if you have a contract for 1 year, 2 years, whatever, with Zaragoza or Valencia, whatever, you're not guaranteed that you're going to continue with that, right?
Correct.
Sometimes you've got extra points if you have already operated in that city.
Well, actually, I think now it's illegal to do that.
It's illegal. Okay.
Yeah.
So all the more reason to
actually,
ask
there was this big situation in Barcelona with the Bithing Metropolitano.
Okay.
Because it's an interesting story, and I think it's public because now it's already awarded, and it's good that they didn't give it to the previous ones who did the Bithing.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, they did this contract that, the only way to make money in that contract is if you were doing the Bithing.
Yeah.
And if you are applying, which by the way, the tier 1 was another company, Next Bike.
Yeah.
I think they were going to be losing a lot of money because we analyzed the tender and we said we're not going because
Yeah.
the only way to make money is if you already have a structure in the city and you're operating something else. Call it Bithing, call it whatever, but there's only Bithing, right? So, and this is what happened. So, I think that now it's not allowed anymore. But yes, you're right. In principle, when we look at the business, we look at the business for a project finance. Is it 4 years, 5 years, and we should be able to repay the debt and make profit for that period of time.
And how about the churn then? Because other traditional companies, if you're running a SaaS and you've got churn, but usually you don't lose clients if you're on a retainer. It's kind of like hard to lose clients unless you fuck up or you change the pricing or something. They stay there for life, right? So it creates all of these accumulative effect, right? The compounding effect. Mm-hmm. Whereas with public administration, you cannot really have this compounding effect unless you're operating in secondary markets, right? How did you calculate the churn there, and how did you manage that?
Churn based on number of contracts that we don't win, but we don't know yet. Right?
The ones that don't get renewed.
So we only have one example of this, which was positive, which is we've been renewed in Zaragoza. It was the first tender that happened in all Europe.
Yeah.
It was made by the government of Podemos back in the day.
Okay.
And we won the first contract, happened in Europe. It finished. Now is the Partido Popular, which is absolutely different.
Yeah,
and we won the new contract. And we won the new contract for both the scooters, bikes, and mopeds.
Yeah.
So, in that case, we've been renewed. But by the way, it was a completely independent. It was like a super separated contract, but we won it again. So I think, right, churn here, it depends more on, I don't think it's a matter of relationship with the city hall. We don't typically or almost never talk to politicians or anything like that because we don't want to interfere with that, and we just want to do whatever. Of course, we try to influence technically because we think they should prioritize companies with good R&D and not companies which are friends with some technician. But in general, or generally speaking, we spend more time on kind of making sure that they do the best for the city. But we don't think the political approach is an approach that makes sense in this market.
That's a really good point, and I like to hear that from an entrepreneur because usually entrepreneurs come here and they say like, fuck Podemos and stuff like that. Fuck public administration.
No. I mean,
so,
for us,
it's very easy to say that. It's very hard to do it the legal way like you did. So my kudos to you. Let's talk about the sale, right? Because we've had some successful exits here, but a lot of them were like, it's just so recent. Like I remember when El Tenedor sold to TripAdvisor, or King sold to Activision. They're like so recent they couldn't talk about it. I couldn't talk about it for like 6 months, 2 years. It's like, well, what the fuck, right? We're still waiting for Pau Garcia Milan to come here and explain us the sale to Telefonica. If she had a contract for like 10 years, you gotta talk about that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so in your case, can you explain a little bit, or people like here, because everybody dreams about selling the company, like, is it really that good? How long does it take? Let's start from the very beginning. How did they contact you? How did you go for outbound?
So first of all, I mean, we don't see it as a sale. We see it more as a merger.
Yeah.
Even technically, it's been a sale, but we see it as a merger because we're gonna be very involved in the business and we want to continue growing the business.
Yeah.
And this is the first thing that I want to say, because for us it was not we arrive here, we sell the company and buy. It's completely the opposite. For us it was, we didn't want to sell the business. We think that the business has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
We think we're very in the very early days for electric mobility, and we wanted to find a partner to accelerate our growth, and that was the initial approach.
Mm-hmm. So was it outbound? You went
out
to the market?
Yeah. So essentially, we there was a point where we said, hey, we need to think about the next round. What are we gonna do? And that was like mid last year, and I had these investors that, already invested a couple of $1 million in the company, very small investor in our company, and I wanted to meet them because I never met them in person before. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go to Tulum actually with some of the people that came here today to see with some friends, and then after Tulum, I'm gonna stay 1 more week, and I will go to Miami to visit these people that gave me a couple of million, and I don't know anything about them. Who are these people, right? So
thank you.
out of the 12 million or whatever, 15 million, whatever it is. So I said, okay, let's meet these people. I went to meet them, and then
why specifically them? Why did you want to meet specifically?
Well, I want to meet everybody, right? Because I have to know your customer in general. So when somebody gives you 2 million, you want to see the face and see they are not. Well, in this case, they were coming from cannabis. Which I will explain that later. But they're not drug dealers or anything like that. That's what I mean. So essentially, you want to make sure that everything is compliant, and so on. So I went there and I said, okay, I will stay. It's 1 week of my time. I can work remotely and then just go there. Because it was 3 weeks to enter into the US back in the day, and you had to go through Mexico because Europe was closed.
Last year, yeah.
So the idea was like, And then, so I made it there. I went to meet them, meet last year, and they said, what do you want to do? What's the next steps, right? And I said, I'm thinking on the one side, I need to secure debt financing, and I think retail banks are going to be very slow. So I'm going to start a process, and I actually started the process, and I think it's going to close very successfully. I'm going to start the process the process of raising a certain amount of money as a debt for my clients and for ourselves to grow. That's one thing. And then in parallel, I said, I think we may need another 10, 15, 20 million, not like 100 million, like more like 10, 15 million additional money, and we may take that money. And then, but I didn't want to start the financing, and it was going to be in September, so I discussed this with them, socializing the idea in June, July. And of course, I was always in contact with the CEOs of the main competitors we have, because we all talk to each other, and we have a fluent relationship. And one thing that came to my attention is really I had very few. If I wanted to raise the money, that was one option, and if I wanted to merge with somebody to grow, which is similar to raise capital in my mind, for all of these consolidation kind of games, it was very difficult for me to choose someone because all the companies in this market were shit, and all of them were losing lots of money, and all of them having very big amounts of stacks of liquidation preference, and for me it was very, very difficult to really understand what were these companies worth, because typically they were companies 100 million revenue, but they were losing 700 million in total, like cumulative losses, and 2-year companies also. For me, it was like, okay, I cannot sell to this one, not to this one, not to this one, not to this one, not to this one, and none of them will pay cash, of course, because they don't have cash, because they were burning so much. So, okay, no. And then I met a couple of that maybe yes, but I didn't know because I think valuations are very inflated. I've been talking about this kind of bubble situation for a while. It's not like I'm going to say I've been talking about it, but for me it was like very clear that everything was overpriced. Mm-hmm. So I was saying, okay, whatever. So I went to talk to these guys and I said, look, I may do a round because my option of selling the business would be nice, but nobody's going to pay me cash, and I want to get some cash off the table because I think valuations are very inflated, and I think my shareholders also want some mix, and we don't want to do that. And our option will be we will make a new round and we will continue to grow, and I think we can build a unicorn, but we don't need to raise more than 20, 30 million. And then they said, "Oh,
This time around, you didn't punch a table, stand
no,
up.
no, no,
like,
I was like this,
jump
and
around,
then
no.
exactly, and then I
Okay,
said, I said that, I think my only option will be I will raise money from investors. I will continue to grow the business, and I think that we can make 50 million maybe in 1 year, and then I, so they said, why don't we do it together, right? Because this group was a group that is a private equity group that they made many things, hospitality, um, they did cannabis as well.
Yeah.
They did the different things, but the typical thing they do is they invest in businesses, they make them grow, and they IPO the businesses, and then they did many successful IPOs originally from Canada, and they said to me, why don't you do it with me and or with us, right, with the group, and we can certainly pay you some cash because and then we can also pay you some equity, and we can continue to grow it and do it with you and be incentivized and fully aligned. And I thought it was a good idea, so I explored the idea. And from, I would say, September, October till April, we were pretty close. I was very much in Miami, like 5-6 months, closing this deal and negotiating this deal, because the deal has a lot of implications in terms of the potential growth. How is it going to be for the future? How are we gonna expand? Are we gonna acquire more companies or not? Which kind of companies? What is the plan, right? So that's why I say for me it's a sale, but it really is a merger, because there's a component that is in equity, and it's really subject to growing that equity value in the future, right? There's a price set, and that's very clear, but also there's all the potential upside that it's huge, and I really believe on it.
So you only wanted to go with that. It was not a traditional sale where you kind
Yeah.
of like hire an M&A boutique and then they kind of like shop it around a little bit and then.
Yeah, so I spoke to some of the traditional M&A advisors. My first thought was that they were really lost in this market. We spoke to some corporates as well. We actually got a couple of offers from good corporates. One of them was actually very interesting.
Okay.
Very interesting. But anyway, from some corporate changes, we at some point, none of the options we had on the table were as good as this one, in our opinion. So yes, we did some competitive process, not really formally. It was more like people were approaching us, and then we made a process itself, plus a couple of people from a friend that has an investment bank, but not really like a proper process. And then this offer came through, and very quickly, the more we were spending time on this, the more we knew that we wanted to do it this way.
Because my question comes because traditionally when you open an M&A process, and one of the first things that a potential acquirer asks you is all of this documentation, because they want to audit you, they want to do the due diligence and whatnot.
Yeah.
So you have to generate this.
We're audited, so that's another thing, which is we are audited since day one.
Okay.
Because we work with public administration, so we are audited. We have lots of documents, due diligence documents, materials, metrics. We have all of these since day one.
So everything was prepared. So it's not like.
Yeah, but not for M&A. It was prepared just because when we raise money from banks, they ask for everything.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
And so because we take money from banks, public administration, all of this, we were actually audited. Every year. So for us, it's like it was business as usual. It was not super difficult. This was not like, oh, there's a mess and we need to start from scratch. There were some things that we had to do, but. And of course, they requested a lot of documentation, and they made a proper. But it was not the end of the world.
There's been a lot of consolidation. The reason I brought up M&A is because there's been a lot of consolidation in the market. Doesn't matter. One of my clients, Spin, sold to Tier, right? And so, but they had been acquired by Ford. Ford kind of like got tired of their toy, and they're like, "Fuck this shit, the startups. We don't understand it. Let's sell it to another startup," right? A lot of companies, there was Spin was here. They closed Europe. Scoot was here. They closed Barcelona. I don't know if they were anywhere else in Europe, but kind of like it grew smaller and smaller, more concentrated. So I assume that you didn't sell to another big player in the industry because they are not profitable and they probably couldn't afford it, or what was the reason?
To not sell to one of these players?
Yeah,
they lose money. They will pay us with equity.
Yeah.
And that equity is worth zero.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So of course, they would be willing to pay an amount for us that includes almost all equity.
So no cash.
And that equity, in my opinion, is worth zero. So it's like paying nothing. So we wouldn't want to give it away. So
So how
Yeah, it
about
was
the process of, because you mentioned that you spent like 5, 6 months in Miami
in total, right?
in
So since
total.
the first term sheet, yes, first term sheet took us like 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah,
Then it was Christmas in the middle, so it was a little bit
yeah.
yeah. But essentially 6 to 8 weeks, and then to finalize the SPAs, we took a lot of time. We took like 3 months.
But
Probably.
actually, that's pretty fast for an M&A process. Maybe it's because you had an existing relationship, they know you or something. Usually
Yeah,
we'd be talking about 12 to
it's
18
also
months.
because I was there, and I
Yeah.
was there with the lawyers, I was there
Okay.
with the in-house counsel, with the president, the CEO, with everybody, and we were going one by one, each of the reps and warrants, each of the negotiating everything,
Okay.
one by one. So we wouldn't let this. Actually, I'm very happy because they when we started the process, they said to me, "There's two ways of doing this, Pep.
Yeah.
There's one way, which is we let the lawyers do it.
Yeah.
I can tell you, 70% chances the deal will not happen." They said this to me. So, full disclosure, they will bill fees, they will fight, whatever. And then also it's going to be a mess and it will take us a year. There's another way of doing this, Pep, which is we sit down, we negotiate point by point, we give it to the lawyers, and when there's a big enough point that it's important, we tell them to stop, we sit down again and we talk between us, we get to an agreement, we go back to the lawyers and we give it to them. But we don't let them decide anything. Because if they do this, it's going to be a mess. And I'm very happy that they said that because looking backwards, that's true. And even after the deal, how there's been a lot of like, these lawyers, oh, this I didn't like about the agreement. So it's like all of these people involved giving their opinion. And, I think it was very good that we negotiated thing by thing directly with the whole people. Because that would mean that if there was something that we didn't like, we just say it up front. We don't want to do this. It's not like I'm gonna try to squeeze this or hide it or something. Yeah. It's not like that. It's more like this thing we don't think is the case, or this thing we think about this, or this. And also it got me time to get to know them and how they think, how they act, how is this relationship gonna be in the future. Do I believe that we can be successful together as a team and build a very large company or not? And those kind of things are very important. Do my team interact very well with their team? Is this going to be like kind of relationship that works? Because of course they are very rich, they're private equity, we're a startup mentality. So I think that it gave us both the possibility to close the deal in 5 to 6 months, that maybe people think is very long, but it's actually short, as you said. And then on the other side to see psychologically and personality-wise and cultural fit-wise, if that makes sense for us or not.
Two quick questions to wrap this up. One of the problems with M&A process is that they involve the C-level, the leadership team of the company, and they take away your focus.
Yeah.
And it's hard to stop that information from leaking into the team because they see you're not focused, you're not going to the same meetings.
Yeah.
Maybe some forwarded email, you see the wrong person, something like that. And you don't want that information to leak to the team. How did you do it? How did you keep your focus?
First of all our team, I would say everybody, maybe there's one or two people that are not, but everybody is a stockholder in the company.
Okay.
So everybody has shares in the company, and some of them.
Everybody knew?
Everybody more or less knew, but
What's more or less?
Well, this is not like a bubble company where, right? How are they going to acquire us, or are we going to go to the street, whatever? I mean, there's some people here from our team. I think everybody knew, right, Oscar? They knew, but they also knew that if this deal doesn't happen, we don't give a shit.
Yeah, because we're profitable.
They were like, well, not because we're profitable, because we still need working capital, and there's many times they are tied on cash and they don't really know what to do and whatever. But just because they said, okay, if this deal doesn't happen, I believe in the business, so fuck them, right? Like whatever, like
Yeah.
So the mentality and the culture, I think we did a great job there. Not because of me, but I say the team in general, because we all know, everybody knows, everybody kind of knew. Everybody was involved in the due diligence and preparing materials and everything. And but the mentality was not, wow, it's either this or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe because when I was in my previous company in Fever, we had a couple of situations, raising money or selling or trying to, right? Not trying to sell the business, but more like raising money. They were like, oh, we don't close the financing, we shut down the business because it's like we burn so much money, we have to grow so fast. Here it was more like mild kind of thing. It was more like not with sense of relaxed, but everybody knew. Nobody told anyone in the press, for example. It was very exemplary, and I'm very proud of the team we have because it was very professional. Despite we have a lot of young people, and people were super professional. It's incredible. It's like
Nice.
because of course they also interviewed everybody in the teams. So
The last one, and I want you to be as explicit as possible here.
yes,
What is your most expensive fuck up in Reby? Where did you lose the most, like the biggest amount of money? Because of you.
Well, we have a very cool office.
That's really expensive.
It's fucking expensive.
Did you kind of like buy it in February 2020 or something? I knew
No,
a few.
no, we got
I know
it.
a few.
No, we got it. We got it in this kind of a step up. We got it in a situation where we negotiated, like the price goes up, and I was like, of course, you're very positive as an entrepreneur. You say, fuck, I'm gonna be 300 people,
Yeah.
and at some point the rent was going up, and our company was growing, but not as the rent.
Yeah.
So, I love that office, and we're really, we're happy at the office. It's just very expensive, and I think everybody reminds me that in the company every time I talk about burn and reducing cost. Say, well, we cannot reduce cost of this office because we told you to take another office, and you said you wanted this office, and now we're trapped here, and we
You're like,
go
fuck,
away.
I want this office.
I wanted this office, and they said like, let's take a slightly smaller one. And I said, no, because we need the best people, so we need the best. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was probably a big fuck up that we did, which at the end I hope it will not be a fuck up because people are very happy in that office. It's just that expensive, and for relative purposes in my mind, which we are very scrappy and very efficient. Probably that's the only thing that doesn't reflect our scrappiness.
Okay.
Because it's a very cool place to work. That's a good thing too.
Nice. That's a good ending note. Let's go to the questions. Hey, Victor, you want to help us with the mic? Oh, Francesco? Yeah, there's a mic over there. While we get the mic, I can ask you something else, which is from Barcelona, from Santa Cruz in Barcelona. Pep, how can we help you or Reby now? Well, we get
This is what
questions.
everybody says, I think, no? Like,
Yeah.
we want to hire more people.
Okay.
We're looking for, especially now, we're looking very, very intensively, people in finance, and controllers, finance, M&A, all of that. And we just started the process, and we're looking for people in that department. It's very important for us because we're going to be growing a lot, and we need a lot of people in that department. Corporate development, M&A, accounting, finance, controllers. And of course, developers. So developers we're looking for all the time.
Everybody looks for developers.
Yes.
Let's get through the next question. See your name and question.
Name is Greg, and Alex touched on this a little earlier, but excuse my voice a moment. Seems an increasingly risk-off environment. I can't speak to the local economy, but globally speaking, it seems like investors are going to be having a harder time raising capital unless, as you said, maybe profit is within 5 years, if not a year. And I'm wondering if there's anything you could add to how startups and founders could frame their story, frame their narrative to increase the likelihood that people would invest with them.
Yeah. First of all, I don't think investors will stop investing because I think they just raised a lot of money and they have 5 years ahead to invest money. So what happened is people go to the market, they raise money, and then they have like 5 years to invest the money, 4 or 5 years, 3 years. So I think that there's going to be lots of money to invest, and that's not going to slow down. The contrary. I mean, there's many people who raised a lot of money, and now they have to deploy the capital. But second, I think that correction is going to happen for late stage rounds. So if I would have to invest my own money, I would probably invest it in early stage and not in late stage, because late stage is where the biggest correction is going to happen. So I think fortunately for people who start new businesses, what will happen is that they will raise money, but the valuations will be lower as they grow over time. And for investors, it will also be good because they will be investing at a lower valuations than before, just because they were not real, the previous valuations, in my opinion. So the only thing I would say to an entrepreneur is you're building a business, right? Or sometimes you're building a consumer product. That's a different story. But just in general, building a business, whatever it's SaaS, marketplace, whatever it is. So you should always remind yourself about that, right? So when people say, There was a while ago where people were going to Y Combinator to prove the unit economics work and that actually there's something there. And there's been, the last 2 to 3 years, there's been many companies raising capital without proving any unit economics. I think that will not happen. I think we're going to go back to the early stage world where you were working to try to show some cohorts where there's some profitability and some payback, and not anymore about I'm bold on this idea and I really want to grow it and I'm going to be the first. I think, in many situations, first to market doesn't mean much.
Let's take a couple more.
Hi Alex, hi Pep. Thank you for insightful conversation. My name is Laila.
Thank you very much.
My question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Do you hear me? My question is to you, Pep, regarding your opinion on this building a personal brand. Because I came prepared. I checked your Instagram.
Yes.
And you have
My Instagram.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me check it now.
And you have about 20K followers.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, what's your opinion? Like, imagine you have 2 million followers there. How different your professional life would be?
I don't use Instagram much. I don't use.
You're even verified. You've got the blue check.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't use it. So
Okay.
I use it to put my music. I make music. I'm a musician,
That's another question. Yeah.
and I do it because I want to share my music and have a place to have it. But I don't use it for professional reasons. So it's not like I'm trying to build something where I say, "Oh, I'm an evangelist teacher that I will help you how to be successful in life," or things like that, because I don't really believe that. So I'm not really trying to grow my social media based on that. So I don't know if that responds to your question, but essentially I keep it very, not for me, obviously it's an open profile, but I put music and things I like.
Yeah, that was like basically my question, because I read that you're interested in music and maybe growing your personal brand on Instagram or any other social
Yeah.
platform would like help that, I don't know, hobby or professional part of yours. But it's just,
Yeah,
curiosity.
for me, I'm not trying to make a business yet out of my music. So
Yet.
So I'm not not for now, but yeah.
Let's take 2 quick ones.
Gerard here. Thank you so much, Pep, for sharing your experience.
Thanks a lot.
I have a really short question. I'd like to know what was your strategy in those months when cash was running out to manage the team and to stick to make the team stick together, even though maybe they know they will lose their jobs.
Yeah.
So that's the question. Thanks.
So so the question is, what did I do when I was when
What was your strategy
when
to manage the team?
How do you communicate? Do you over communicate?
when we didn't have money and so on?
Yeah.
When you were running out of money, maybe.
Yeah, everybody knows in the company. You can ask here people. Yeah,
But maybe you don't want to communicate
Yeah.
too early because
we're very vocal about it.
Okay.
I did it many times. For example, in Fever, there was for a while the management team wanted. I was the founder, but I had a management team, and sometimes they wanted just to hide it, not to say it. I think that doesn't last much because people talk, and the accountant talks to whatever, and the office manager to whatever. So we are very upfront with this. We say we got this money, or we say, but this money is for this purpose, or we say it's a tight time. You have to wait, push back a couple of months. So everybody knows exactly what's happening, pretty much. Not exactly, but they know there's money, there's no money, and they know that. And then in terms of salaries, of course, which this may happen, right? You make a big financing round, and then people come and say, I want to get paid double. We never announced any financing round. The first time people knew how much money we raised was when the company was acquired,
wow.
because we never announced how much money we raised. It's something that we keep very low profile, and we didn't really care. We didn't want anyone to know.
Can we take the last one, please? The decision is on you. First
Hi.
time here, right?
Yeah, first time.
Yeah.
Very first time. I'm Otman from Belgium. I have a specific question. So 2 years ago we had a pandemic, and now we have a big inflation. So my question is, how, if you project yourself like backwards, how would you do things differently 2 years ago, when you were in confinement, a lockdown, we went all crazies. Now it's gonna be also crazy times with inflation. How would you do things differently?
Yeah, of course, if I knew the pandemic was coming, I wouldn't start a company in the mobility space. But but I think that I was also there's always some component of luckiness, and I think I was lucky that I had very good team around me at the right time and so on when we decided to, because when the pandemic happened, for example, and I was telling Alex this before, we were purely B2C operating scooters on the street, and suddenly, boom, 1 million a month revenue to zero.
Wow.
And we said, okay, what can we do, right? And we said, okay, let's create this franchisee program where we actually license our technology and the hardware, and let's create a program where we actually find local champions willing to start their own scooter company and provide that service, because there's many people who want to start a company in the scooter market. So and we changed the whole, and that business today is 90, not 90, but like for last year, for 2021, of course, because there was restrictions still in mobility, it was like 75% of our business. The new business we created in the pandemic, which was B2B. So I think that you just need to adapt. And we were thinking a lot about what are we gonna do, and then at some point we said we just need to survive. We need to grow revenue-wise. We need to make money. How can you make money? You can sell mascarillas, masks, or you can sell scooters.
Yeah.
So we decided to go the second route.
All right, good one. Let's give it up for Pep. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.